Hello everyone, welcome to this live stream from Simply Science. Um, Obviously for the last few weeks this has been quite a difficult situation for everyone. I've had quite a few different questions from quite a lot of different people about what's going on, what's going to happen, um, where we are at the moment, truths, untruths. There's been a lot of misinformation on Facebook. So I thought I would do a live stream, put this quickly together to just answer a few questions that a few people might have, especially if you've got children that might be a little bit worried. First bit of background about me. I'm currently doing a science degree with the Open University. Funnily enough, the last module that I've just done was infectious diseases and public health. And in the one of the questions we were asked to do in mid to early December was looking at new emerging viruses, and I caught something on online about this novel coronavirus that had infected a couple of hundred people in Hubei province in China. Didn't really think a huge amount of it then, other than, well, if they don't get on top of that, that could be a problem. And then moved on, did the rest of the course, moved on with my life, had Christmas, and then come January, February time, started to see it in the news a lot more. So it is a very worrying time for everybody, but hopefully I can answer a few questions that some people might have. Um, the I have about a minute or two's delay on Facebook, so if anybody asks any questions, I'll try and answer them as I go. But bear in mind, it might be about a minute's delay or so. So just the first few things we're going to be looking at today. The first thing is, what is a virus, what it looks like, kind of a little bit how it functions. Also, what is a pandemic? It's a word that might be a bit scary to quite a few people. And thirdly, basically, what do I think is going to happen next? Where we are at the moment, what's going to happen in the next few weeks, and how this is going to play out over the slightly more longer term. So, looking at what a virus is, the definition of a virus is that it's an infective agent that typically consists of a nucleic acid molecule in a protein coat that is too small to be seen by light microscopy and is able to multiply only within the living cells of a host. That all sounds a bit complicated, obviously, but what it basically means is that a nucleic acid molecule is basically DNA. We have DNA inside every one of our cells. Viruses usually have a simpler form called RNA, but they basically have that same kind of genetic code that allows it to reproduce. It's in a protein coat. We'll get into that a little in a minute. It's too small to be seen by light microscopy. What that means is you can't see it with a regular microscope. It's just too small. And it is able to multiply only within the living cells of a host. So it needs a living organism to be able to reproduce. That's where there's a difference between a virus and a bacteria. A bacteria doesn't need a living host to be able to reproduce. It just needs food, nutrients, things like that. The other thing about a virus to note is how it kind of enters the body and what it does. What it basically does is this graphic here. Don't worry about the names or anything. You can see the virus on the left hand side. It enters the cell, so the large pink area there is the cell. It enters the cell. It then releases its own DNA or RNA into your cell or into the living cell, and then forces your cell to make more viruses. Okay, that's the basic explanation of what it does. So what I'm going to do now is going to show you a 3D model of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Okay, this is the one that is going around at the moment. Hi Fee. As you can see, it actually looks a little bit scary. This isn't an actual colour representation. This is just coloured this way so that you can see the differences between the different things. Okay, so you've probably seen on the news this kind of circular shape with these little nodules on the outside. Okay, and these nodules on the outside are proteins. Okay, they're the proteins that allow it to attach to the cell. And this inside, if I just show the names, I can see this is the RNA, or the equivalent of the DNA inside the virus cell. Okay, this is what does the programming. Those of you that might know a little bit about DNA, the DNA or RNA in this case is the genetic code that programs how to make the cell. It programs how to make you, but it programs how to make each and every cell in your body. So that's the RNA, the glycoproteins on the outside. Those are what allows it to attach and enter the cell. So when you have different coronaviruses, or you have different viruses, or even bacteria, in some cases, that determines what cell it can infect. So in the case of SARS, these proteins on the outside only attach to cells within human, in this case, lungs. Okay, so that's why it is a respiratory virus. Okay, that's why it affects the lungs. If you had a different virus with different proteins on the outside, it would affect a different part of the body. For example, the kidneys or the heart or the skin. It's the same with fungal infections as well. They have ways of only infecting certain parts of the body. Now, this part on the outside, this part you can see here, that's called the envelope. Okay, this is the outer shell of the virus, and we'll come back to that in a little while. That will be important in a little while, and I will try and get back to that 3D model in a second. Switching between the different things is a bit difficult. I haven't really used this software very much before, so you might have to bear with me. But a few facts about coronavirus that you might not know. Its name is SARS-CoV-2 because it's a coronavirus. Coronavirus is a group of viruses that contains SARS and MERS. Those are two viruses you might have heard of. And in this case, SARS is... I can't remember now. Something acute respiratory infection. So it's SARS viruses are respiratory viruses. Obviously, the COV is coronavirus, and it's the second strain that has been identified. Okay, the disease name is COVID-19. That's probably the one that you've heard the most. But there is a difference between the virus and the disease, because they do that because different viruses can cause different diseases. So if you just called the virus COVID-19, that would cause confusion between one virus causing three different diseases and another similar virus causing another disease. So that's why they name them differently. The mortality rate is around 2%. There's not a lot of information at the moment about the mortality rate. The mortality rate is basically how many people per 1,000 die from the disease or have it badly enough for it to kill them. It's around 2% at the moment. It'll probably be lower when everything has finished, the scientists have done their research, and they find out what the actual percentage is. But at the moment, it's around about 2%. The child mortality rate is 0.0002%, which shows the difference that children are having at the moment. It's not infecting children as much as it's infecting older and more vulnerable people. And when they do get infected, they are having much milder symptoms. That doesn't mean that every single child is going to have mild symptoms. It just means that within the general population, 0.0002% are unfortunately dying from it, but that's such a small number. The other thing that people might not know about it is the common cold is caused by a coronavirus. So this whole coronavirus thing being new and nobody's ever heard of it before, it's been around for thousands of years. The virus name is HCOV229E. H stands for human, COV stands for coronavirus, and it's the 229E strain of a coronavirus that causes the common cold. So we've all probably had coronavirus at some point. It's just that we haven't had SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19. I didn't actually know that until yesterday when I was researching things for this. So that's quite an interesting fact, but it does go to show that coronavirus isn't this one virus that we're getting now. It's lots of different viruses. The best thing that can be done to stop the virus is by washing your hands, along with social distancing and limiting your contact with other people. As I said earlier, the outer shell of that virus is made up of a lipid. It's called a lipid bilayer. That outer shell is basically oil, and the best thing that breaks up oil is soap or detergents. So washing your hands for 20 seconds as often as possible is probably the best thing to do. It completely destroys most of the virus that will be on your hands, plus just the fact of having warm running water running over your hands for 20 seconds or longer if you can, you're probably going to wash a lot of that virus off your hands. Obviously try not to touch your face, because obviously it's quite hard for the virus to get into your skin. So the problem with it being on your hands is I've just touched my face, which I shouldn't be doing. I'm just telling you not to touch your face. Just touch my face. So touching your eyes, touching your ears, your mouth especially. It can get then, if you've got it on your hands, it will get straight into your body, which is obviously not what you want to do. This picture here shows the lipid bilayer. So you can see there's two different layers that face in towards each other, and what soaps and detergents do is they just break that layer apart. So obviously if the layer's broken apart, the proteins on the outside fall apart. It can't infect cells, can't inject its RNA into the cell, and therefore can't do its thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about was what is a pandemic, because again that's a something that sounds like quite a scary word, and it's usually a word that we hear when watching a film about a zombie apocalypse or some sort of post-apocalyptic film like that. There are two words that you need to know, and that the first is endemic, which means an infection that is normally always present in a population. So the common cold is endemic. Flus are endemic. Unfortunately, thanks to the anti-vaccination people, measles is now endemic, again when it wasn't. I don't want to go into anti-vaccination things now, but there are other viruses and infections, bacterial infections, that are endemic. Pandemic means an infection that is present within populations throughout most of the world. So that's all that pandemic means. It means that there is a certain virus or bacterial infection that is present in a lot of countries around the world. Pandemics can or viruses and bacterial infections can spread very, very quickly. And I just wanted to show you this this animation about showing how quickly that this particular virus spread. So this is going to be showing where it spread from the first cases in Hubei, China. At this point, is January the 22nd, and it goes up to March the 22nd, which was a couple of days ago. So at this point, we have 556 cases. Actually, so we have quite a few in China. We have a few in Thailand. I think most of them in China, Japan, and then surprisingly the US has 2 cases. I actually thought that it was Europe that got it first, and then it kind of went over this way. But actually, looking by this is obviously the first lot of data that they've had. So this could prove to be wrong in the end, but we'll see. So as you can see over the days, so we've got a February the 1st. So just within a few days, the virus has spread to other continents around the world. You can see we've already got 2 cases. There's a few more cases in America, some in Canada, United Arab Emirates, a few in Russia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, places like that, Australia. So that's just within a few days. But there is a point, you'll notice in a second, where it explodes. This is called, if we can get to it, the critical mass point. Okay, so we've got, there we go there. So we've got a point around March the 3rd, around here somewhere, where things, because it's in those countries and enough people in those countries have it, they are beginning to spread it. And it will spread what's called exponentially. If one person has it, they won't just infect one other person. They will infect 2 or 3, possibly 4. If you think about then those 4 people infecting another 4 people each, you've got 16 people within a very short amount of time. That's how it spreads very, very rapidly. So you can see there, by the time we get to March 22nd, we've got 33,000 cases in the US, Italy has 59,000, China has 67. So it's very, very rapid. Once it is pandemic, and once it is every country around the world. Hi Beck. It is then very hard to control it. The only thing you can do then is try to stop the spread and limit contact between people. Obviously, as you may have heard, as of last night, the current situation is we're now in lockdown. This is where the government has advised everybody to stay in their homes and not travel unless it's absolutely necessary. This is going to prevent people that already have it from passing it on to somebody else. The incubation period, which is the period between when you get the virus and when you start showing symptoms, can be anywhere between 3 days and 2 weeks. Okay, so you could be traveling around all over the place with the virus, passing it on to other people, not knowing you've got it for 2 weeks. The other thing is you are infectious for about 4 or 5 days before you have symptoms. So for those 4 or 5 days before you have symptoms, you are infectious. So the best way to stop that is by people not having contact with other people. It's fine within your own home, but going out and spreading it at work or at school is obviously not something the government wants at the moment. So the advice is you're not advised to leave your home unless it's for shopping for necessities, collecting medical supplies, going to and from work, but that's for key workers only, looking after vulnerable people, and for exercise. So it's perfectly fine to go for a walk on the beach, so long as you do it with your home unit, the people you live with. So unfortunately, you can't all go and play with your friends at their houses, and playing out on the street with your friends is also not advised. Unfortunately, sorry to say that. But so for the next 2 or 3 weeks, there is going to be a huge rise in cases. There are going to be a lot more people with the virus, okay, because of that incubation period, because you have that 2 weeks. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to now be catching up with having caught it and will start showing symptoms. The peak of this will be around the beginning of July. Okay, so we've got a good few weeks yet before the peak hits. Cases will then begin to slow down and drop as the effect of this social isolation, so the effect of people not having contact with each other, will start to be shown. And we'll kind of be back to where we are now with case numbers towards the middle of the end of August. So hopefully in September things will be starting to get a lot better. As for the lockdown, I think they've said it's 3 weeks and they'll review it after that. Personally, I think it might be extended, but not much more than that. 3 weeks might be enough. Depends on how flattened this curve gets. Once the restrictions begin to relax, we'll then see another peak in cases around December. Okay. Once people start to interact with each other again, there is going to be another peak of people. It won't be as bad as we've got now. We might not need to see as much restrictions as we are now. Hopefully the restrictions that we have in place now for the next 12 weeks possibly will teach us that social distancing, and that teach us to be careful, because we don't want that peak in December to be as high as it is now. Once there's a vaccine, which is a way of preventing the disease, we'll be over it. Once we have a vaccine, we'll be able to distribute it to all the vulnerable people, and then start distributing it to regular people, depending on how much it's going to cost. And then we'll be over coronavirus. Last thing is really, does anybody have any questions from that they'd like to ask? Obviously, as there's a bit of a delay, I'll give it a few minutes to filter down into the chat, just to see if anyone's got any questions about anything that I've said or anything else that I haven't covered that they're worried about. I know there has been a lot of misinformation, especially on social media, about certain things. I've heard in the last couple of days that a lot of people are saying that a loss of a sense of smell is a symptom or an indication that you have coronavirus without having any other symptoms. That could be the case. There's no scientific evidence for that. The only evidence that there is that happens with colds and flus, which are respiratory viruses. So I think I saw something about up to a third of people that they've tested, that they've had in hospital, that have had the coronavirus, have had that loss of smell. Thank you, Fee. Yeah, it's the washing hands thing. It sounds really silly when you've got a government that are advising you what to do, and all they're telling you to do is wash your hands, and you're sitting there thinking, well, how is that going to help? But when you understand what a virus is made out of, and that just simply washing your hands with soap or detergent, washing up liquid, things like that, literally kills the virus. And if you do it often enough and thoroughly enough, it's the best way to stop the spread, other than a vaccine, obviously. Hello, Joan. Yeah, the loss of smell thing. Yeah, it could happen, but it's not necessarily a symptom of coronavirus. It's just a symptom of respiratory infections. Oh, thank you, Jane. Just trying to think of anything else that I've seen. I can't really think of anything that I've seen recently. Yeah, yeah, just wash your hands. It's so simple. It is really simple. Every time my boys went out the door for school every morning, I was saying, wash your hands. Um, and just being sensible, really. Sensible with your contact with other people. And I think that's even more important now that we're in lockdown. I think we have to understand that we're not going to be able to socialise with people at all, at least for the next 3 weeks. And even after that, it's going to be back to the way we've just been doing it for the last few weeks. It's going to be limiting that social contact. Um, yeah, the map of the map spread. It is quite frightening, but only because it shows how quickly it can spread, and because of that speed, um, it's why it was really important for people to take notice of the advice they were being given 2 to 3 weeks ago, because it spreads so quickly and so rapidly, and there's not a lot you can do about it. There's not a lot that governments can do about it, but there is a lot that we as individuals can do about it if we take it seriously. I remember 2 or 3 weeks ago, quite a lot of people on Facebook were making light of the situation and saying, "Oh, it's just flu," and 250,000 people a year die of regular flu. And I kept saying to them, um, "Don't be ignorant. This isn't regular flu. This isn't going to go away. It is going to get worse. Take it seriously." Do I know what symptoms come first? A lot of the thank you, Grace, by the way. Um, a lot of the symptoms that people are tending to get first. I mean, the two main ones are the tickly cough and the temperature. The main one that people seem to be getting first is the cough. Usually because that cough is your body's natural response to try and eject something that it knows should not be there. Um, so when your body starts to respond to something, you usually feel your glands swelling up underneath your neck. That's because of your lymph nodes start producing antibodies to get rid of whatever virus you have. So that when you have regular illnesses, you'll notice that your glands start to swell up, and that's why when you go to the doctors, he goes like that and checks under your chin. So most people are finding that the cough arrives first. A lot of other people are having the temperature, but I think it's the two together that usually signify it's coronavirus and not it might not be some other flu. The other thing we have to remember is we are still in flu season, flu and cold, so there is a lot of that still going to be going around. Obviously a lot less now that we're socially isolating, but unfortunately there isn't a particular thing that comes first. The other thing to remember, especially for children, is that statistically they are not seeing the harsher symptoms. When children do get it, they're usually quite mild. I mean, a lot of us probably know a child that has possibly had it recently, and she's been okay. She's not had particularly bad symptoms, which is good. Even though that might just be regular flu or some other virus. But yeah, statistically, children are suffering with it a lot less than adults are, and then adults are suffering with minor symptoms and a lot less than old or vulnerable people are. I'm just going to give it another few minutes. Just to see if anybody else has got any other questions they want to ask. The only other advice I can give you is stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives. The only way that we're going to stop it spreading any further is by doing that. There was something else that I wanted to say about flattening the curve. That's okay, Becky. It'll be up for a while, so you can watch it back. It was flattening the curve. What I did want to just show people was that this graph shows the increase in cases if we did nothing. So the red part is if we did nothing, the amount of people being infected and being hospitalised potentially is going to go up, and the blue line along it is the healthcare system capacity. So we don't want that curve to go any higher than that. So with the protective measures, it should go underneath. So the main reason that we're trying to stop the spread is not only to protect vulnerable people, but to keep the amount of cases and to keep that the amount of cases going up so quickly out of the NHS, because we can't cope with large amount of cases very quickly, but we can cope. The NHS can cope with a large amount of cases over a more spread out period. So that's what they're trying to do. Fiona, when are you next doing this? I think it depends on whether anybody wants me to do anything like this again. I could do it on other subjects or other things, or if I get any other questions, after this, I could do a follow-up one in a few days perhaps, or next week. Becky, flattening the curve of panic shopping would be good too. Yes, it definitely would be. I still don't understand the toilet roll thing, but panic buying is unfortunately a good indication of how selfish people can be. But then, being devil's advocate, when people are scared, they don't make the right decisions quite often, and they only think about themselves, and they kind of have that mentality of, I've got to protect myself and my family, and I'll do anything to do that. And to be honest, nature is kind of a little bit that way anyway. Survival of the fittest, evolution, that sort of thing. So you can kind of understand it. Even though we should be, as a society, we should be above those kind of base instincts, really, but it's quite hard to override those feelings. Finn, will the cases keep going if we don't find a vaccine? Yes, they will. It will keep coming back around and around and around. Each time it does, the curve will be less and less and less until basically everyone's got it or had it, then hopefully becomes immune. There isn't any evidence to say that you're not immune once you've had it, so that's a good thing. But yes, we will keep having peaks until we find a vaccine. A vaccine could be very quick, but it could be up to 18 months. So we're going to see peaks coming back until the vaccine has been given out. And even when the vaccine comes out, it will be first given to vulnerable people before it's given to anybody else. Becky, yes please again. It would be good if I got here on time. We'll watch back. Thanks so much. You're right. I've been a lioness. Absolutely true. We'll protect our family any way we can. Entering human psychology. Yeah. I mean, you did exactly the right thing by self-isolating yourself, and but you made the decisions that not only protected you but protected other people as well. You didn't. There are different ways of protecting yourself and your family without it being detrimental to other people, and that's what people aren't thinking of. It's the same with all the people that went out for a drink on Friday night after they closed the pubs. It. I think part of that was a lot of people aren't taking it seriously. They just think it's the flu. They'll be fine. Yeah, you will. You probably will be fine. It's the people you spread it onto that might not be, and the vulnerable people and the old people. That's what they're not thinking of. They're thinking about themselves and not externally about the general population. I think I will leave it there because I don't want to be too long. Been over half an hour, so I didn't want it to be too long for people to watch back afterwards. Hopefully that's been of some help to people. If anybody else watches this afterwards, that for people to watch it back, and then if they've got any questions, comment on the video or send me a message, and I'll try and if I get a personal message, I'll answer it with a post. I heard there were two strains of the COVID-19 strain. Is that true? The COVID-19 is the disease, but the SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. And yes, there are going to be different strains. The problem with more people being infected is that there is more chance for that virus to mutate. So we will get different strains. Hopefully there won't be too different, and a vaccine will hit those strains as well as the main strain. But as for there being two strains, I did read something yesterday that say that they have identified two strains, but they're not too dissimilar. Obviously, the more people that get infected, the more chance of mutation. So we will have different strains coming out. But hopefully now we're doing the social isolation and the lockdown, the impact of that will be less. Do I think life will be the same after this? No. I think things are going to change a lot once this is over. I think we're going to learn a lot more about how we interact socially, our own personal hygiene. I have thought myself for quite a long time that we shouldn't be too sterile. We need to have infections, we need to get flus, and we need to get bacterial infections, because each time we do, our immunity is built up, and our immune system is improved by subsequent infections. But we have to balance that with being able to control and contain new viruses like this one. I think even though scientists have been warning about pandemics and this kind of pandemic for a very long time, nobody's listened. It's the same with climate change. Scientists have been telling us about climate change since the 50s, or probably even earlier than that, and nobody's listened. And now it's too late to do anything about it. Things are going downhill. It's the same thing with these pandemics. They've been warning for a very long time about these. Nobody's really listened. Nobody's really taken any notice. Hopefully they will now. And I think the other thing is we're starting to realise that a lot of the people that we thought were important just aren't. Celebrities, bankers, all those sorts of people, we don't give a stuff about them right now. It's the NHS workers, it's the shelf stackers, it's the delivery drivers, It's the people that keep this country going on a daily basis, who are the important people. And I've been a delivery driver before, and I really thought of myself as quite embarrassed by that, because I didn't want to almost admit it, because it was seen as a really lowly job. And now I'm kind of realizing that it's quite an important job. And the more I learn about science, and the more that I feel a responsibility to inform and correct things when things are wrong, especially on social media, and find that I can have a difference to people. And so I think my love of science and the knowledge that I've got, if I can give that out to other people and help people, I feel really proud of that. So I better end it there, because it's gone on too long already. Thank you very, very much for everybody that's watched. For anybody that's watching this afterwards, thank you for watching. Give it a like. Subscribe to Simply Science. And as it says there, stay at home, protect the NHS, and save lives. Thank you very much.